You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis or a treatment plan, we just expect a lot of precision.
Right, like engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you have a bacterial infection, the doctor writes a prescription for a very specific antibiotic. They tell you, take exactly 500 milligrams twice a day for 10 days.
It's a calculated dose. I mean, the variables are measured, the outcomes are highly predictable. It's very binary.
You follow the formula, you get the result, it feels clean.
Yeah.
And we really, really like things to be categorized with a precise formula like that.
Oh, absolutely.
But the moment you step into the world of early childhood development, and specifically how we handle physical activity and parenting, that precision just totally vanishes.
It goes right out the window.
We just find ourselves staring at a landscape that is, honestly, mostly guesswork.
We are constantly operating in these diagnostic muddy waters, so to speak. Figuring out exactly what a developing child needs on a physical level on a daily basis is just incredibly ambiguous.
Which is why we're here. Welcome to this custom-tailored dope dive. If you're listening to this, you are someone who is insanely curious about human development. You want to extract the maximum value and insight from the latest research, and you want to do it without drowning in information overload.
Which is easy to do with this stuff.
So easy. So today, our mission is to explore the science of structured play. We're looking at exactly how much organized sports activity a preschooler actually needs to develop foundational motor skills.
Basically, we want to find out if there is a true minimum effective dose for a 4-year-old.
Right. And it's such a vital area of study because it hits right at the heart of the modern parenting and education dilemma. I mean, everyone agrees that exercise is fundamentally good for children.
Sure, no one's debating that.
But today, we see this constant tension. You have the desire to give kids a developmental head start, but also this very real fear of overscheduling them.
Yeah, potentially burning them out before they even reach kindergarten.
Exactly. So we are pulling our insights today from an incredibly rigorous 2026 study out of the Beijing Sport University.
It's a really fascinating piece of literature.
It is. It was published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine, Volume 25, pages 627 through 637. The research team Fang, Xing, Zhao, and Hua, they titled their work, The Influence of Structured Multisport Activities at Different Weekly Frequencies on the Gross Motor Development of Preschool Children, Evidence for a Dose-Response Relationship.
It's a mouthful, but the scientific clarity they bring to this paper is just so refreshing.
Yeah, they really nailed the title.
They aren't just asking the generic question of, whether sports are good. They are trying to pinpoint exactly how much targeted activity is necessary to trigger a measurable change in a child's physical capabilities.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand the results, we first have to look at how the researchers actually measured this quote-unquote dose of activity.
Right. So the researchers set up a 12-week quasi-experimental study. They recruited 63 preschool children, ranging in age from 3 to 6 years old.
Okay, 3 to 6. Got it.
And to test the dose, they categorized these kids into 4 distinct groups. And this was based entirely on how frequently they showed up for a structured multi-sport program.
Let me guess. They didn't just, dump them all in a gym and say, go play. They had to organize the attendance to track the variables, right?
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
So the first group is the low-frequency group, or the L group. These kids participated up to 1 session per week, but it was highly intermittent.
So maybe they came 1 week, missed the next.
Exactly. Very sporadic. The second is the medium frequency, or M group. Now, they had 1 guaranteed fixed session every week, and occasionally they'd drop in for a second one.
Okay, so a baseline of 1. Then they ramped it up to test the higher doses.
Right. The third tier is the medium-high frequency, the MH group. They were locked in for 2 fixed sessions every single week with, an occasional third session.
Got it. And the last one?
Finally, the high frequency, or H group. These children were committed to 3 or more fixed sessions every single week, without fail.
I'm trying to picture what a highly structured session actually looks like for a 3 or 4-year-old. Because, my default mental image of toddler sports is just a lot of chaotic running in circles.
Yeah, or a kid sitting in the middle of a soccer field pulling grass.
Yes, completely ignoring the ball, just inspecting a dandelion.
Right, that is your typical Saturday morning soccer league experience. But this intervention was highly regimented.
Okay, how so?
Each session was exactly 60 minutes long, and it was broken down into very specific blocks. They started with 15 minutes of warm-up games, directed running, jumping, crawling.
I assume to just burn off the initial crazy energy.
Partly, yeah, but the scientific goal was to get the nervous system engaged and the heart rate up. Then came the core of the session, which was 40 minutes of basic circuit practice.
A training circuit for preschoolers. That sounds kind of intense.
Well, a very specific one. They weren't just running wild. They were executing targeted movement tasks. So walking on a balance beam, doing S-shaped running around cones, dodging obstacles, throwing balls at targets.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and after 40 minutes of that, they ended with 5 minutes of cool-down static stretching.
I'm thinking about how this compares to just, letting them loose on a playground. Unstructured recess feels like eating whole foods, right?
Yeah.
It gives you a broad spectrum of baseline nutrition.
That's a good way to look at it.
But a kid might naturally avoid the physical, quote-unquote, vegetables they aren't good at. So they might miss out on specific developmental trace minerals.
Right. They just do what's fun and easy for them.
Exactly. So this 60-minute circuit sounds more like a concentrated multivitamin. You are guaranteeing the body gets the specific nutrients needed to build the neural pathways for, like, complex movements, like a gallop or a skip.
That is a very apt analogy. The playground allows for self-selection, whereas the circuit forces engagement with movements a child might naturally avoid if they find them difficult.
But wait, if all 4 groups are getting the exact same 60-minute multivitamin, just at different weekly rates, are we purely testing the frequency of exposure?
What do you mean?
Like, if they are doing the same balance beam in week 12 that they did in week 1, aren't they going to get bored? I would assume you'd have to make the beam narrower or the run faster to keep challenging them. Like watering a plant once a week versus 3 times a week, you don't change the water itself.
This raises an important question, actually, and it is a crucial distinction regarding their methodology.
Okay.
The researchers deliberately designed the curriculum so that the complexity of the physical tasks did not increase over the 12 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Week 1 looked exactly like week 12 in terms of what was being physically asked of the kids.
So they froze the difficulty level. That totally makes sense. That ensures that if a kid gets better at a skill, it's strictly because they practiced it more often.
Exactly. Not because the coach kept moving the goalposts or introducing new techniques. They wanted frequency to be the only isolated variable.
They needed to see what happens when a developing brain and body interact with the exact same physical puzzle once a week versus 3 times a week.
Precisely. Having that static difficulty makes the results so much clearer to interpret.
Okay, so knowing the setup, let's talk about what actually changed in these children's bodies over those 3 months. The researchers used a very specific metric to grade the kids, right?
They did. They used the Test of Gross Motor Development 3, or the TGMD-3.
Okay, what exactly is that?
The TGMD-3 is considered a gold standard assessment tool in developmental kinesiology. It doesn't just measure how fast a kid can run or how far they can throw.
It's not just a stopwatch and a tape measure.
Right. It meticulously evaluates the mechanics of how they move. So picture a researcher standing in a gym with a clipboard, watching a child attempt a specific task, and checking off very specific biomechanical criteria.
Like whether they step with the correct foot when they throw, or if their arms swing in opposition when they run.
Exactly that. The test breaks gross motor skills down into 2 main categories. First, you have locomotor movements. This involves moving the body continuously through space skills like running, galloping, hopping, sliding.
Okay, and the second?
The second category is object control movements. That involves manipulating things outside the body, like striking a stationary ball with a bat, catching a tossed ball, or dribbling a basketball.
So the good news right out of the gate, and I love this, is that across all 4 groups, from the lowest frequency to the highest, everyone improved their overall gross motor scores.
Yeah, a rising tide lifting all boats.
Yeah.
Just introducing these structured movements into their week helped every single kid make measurable progress.
Which is awesome. But the nuance here, where the data gets really compelling, is when you look at the margins. The medium, high, and high-frequency groups showed significantly greater overall improvements than the low-frequency group.
They did. But the most revealing insights emerge when you split those locomotor and object control skills apart and really examine the individual movements.
Right, because the kids in the low group, the ones going maybe once a week and intermittently at that, they completely failed to show any significant improvement in complex rhythm-based skills.
Right.
I'm talking about the gallop, the skip, and the one-hand stationary dribble. They just didn't make meaningful progress there at all.
While the high and medium-high groups absolutely dominated in the horizontal jump, the 2-hand strike of a stationary ball, and that 1-hand stationary dribble.
Which perfectly illustrates the concept of a dose-response relationship, right? The higher the dose of the structured practice, the greater the biological response in acquiring those specific complex motor skills.
Exactly. It's a direct correlation.
But here's where it gets really interesting. I was looking at the data on the two-hand catch. Catching a ball is a super common object control skill.
Very common.
The data shows significant improvement across the board for all groups in catching, but there was no clear frequency-related advantage between them.
That's right.
Like, the kids going 3 times a week didn't have a statistically significant edge in catching over the kids going just once a week. Why would dribbling a ball require high frequency to master, but catching a ball doesn't follow that same pattern?
So to answer that, we have to look at the fundamentally different neurological and biomechanical demands of those specific actions.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about the mechanics of a skip or a continuous one-hand dribble. A skip requires a rhythmic, asymmetrical coordination between the left and right sides of your body. You step, you hop, you shift your weight, you repeat on the other side.
It's a continuous repeating loop of action and reaction.
A one-hand dribble is very similar. It requires you to push a ball down with a specific amount of force, visually track its return bounce, and meet it at the exact right microsecond with the exact right pressure to push it back down again.
That's actually a lot of math for a 4-year-old brain to do.
It is. These skills demand repeated, rhythmic coordination and highly attuned force control. To build that specific neural pathway, you need regular consolidated practice. You literally have to do it over and over until the body internalizes the rhythm.
Catching a ball, though, isn't a continuous loop.
No, catching is what we call a discrete skill. It relies heavily on basic visual tracking and a single, explosive reactive reflex.
You see the ball coming, you put your hands up, you close them.
Exactly. And a child might naturally develop those foundational reflexes just through normal biological maturation or, everyday unstructured play at home or in the park.
So because the baseline reflex is already developing naturally anyway, the structured gym intervention doesn't dramatically separate the groups.
Right. But skipping and dribbling, those aren't natural reflexes. They require structured, repetitive practice to master.
Okay, but why does a child's brain need 3 days a week to figure out a dribble, but only 1 day to figure out a catch? To understand that, I feel like we have to look under the hood at how human beings actually acquire movement in the first place.
We do. And this brings us to Newell's constraints model.
Newell's constraints model. Okay, what is that?
This is a foundational concept in motor learning. Newell's framework basically dictates that motor development is not simply a byproduct of biological aging.
Wait, really? Because I always thought kids just got more coordinated as they got taller and their muscles grew.
That's a common misconception. A child doesn't just turn 4, celebrate their birthday, and suddenly have the software downloaded into their brain to know how to skip.
Right.
Instead, motor development is what we call an emergent property.
What do you mean it's an emergent property?
It means the skill only emerges from the constant, real-time interaction between 3 distinct things: the individual, the task, and the environment.
Okay, let's visualize that. If a child is doing the balance beam from the study circuit, how did those 3 things interact?
Well, the beam itself, resting on the gym floor, is the environment.
Okay.
The goal of walking from one end to the other without falling off is the task.
And the individual?
The child's own biological makeup, their height, their current muscle tone, their wobbly little ankles, and their developing nervous system. That represents the individual constraints.
Oh, I see. So every time they step onto that beam and their ankle wobbles, their brain receives a data point.
Yes. The child's biology is bumping up against the physical reality of the task and the environment. So applying that to this study, the multi-sport sessions provided a highly consistent environment and very specific tasks. Therefore, the varying weekly frequencies basically represented how regularly these children were forced to interact with those constraints.
So the kids in the high-frequency group were placed into that specific task environment intersection repeatedly. Their biology just had to adapt and overcome those constraints much more often.
Exactly. Their nervous systems were given more opportunities to solve the physical problem.
Think of it like learning a second language. You have your brain, right, which is the individual constraint. You have the vocabulary and grammar rules, which is the task. And you have the immersive classroom setting, which is the environment.
I like that analogy.
If you just do an app lesson on your phone once a week intermittently, like our low-frequency group, you might memorize a few random words, but you aren't really forced to use them.
The stakes are too low and the exposure is too sparse.
Right. But if you immerse yourself in that language classroom 2 or 3 times a week, like the medium, high, and high groups, you force your brain to actually adapt.
You have to start coordinating the grammar.
Yeah, linking sentences together smoothly in real time because the exposure is frequent enough to actually demand adaptation. You can't just rely on biological aging to learn Spanish, right? You have to interact with the environment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what you're describing with both the language and the physical skills is the creation of feedback loops.
The feedback loops.
Right. Neuroplasticity requires repetition. When a child tries to dribble a ball and it bounces off their foot instead of coming back to their hand, they receive immediate physical feedback. The environment tells them they failed the task.
And if they don't try again for another 10 days, that feedback loop degrades. The nervous system forgets the error, so it can't correct it.
Exactly. The memory of that specific muscular failure fades. But if they are back in the gym 2 days later, that feedback loop is fresh.
The nervous system remembers the wobble.
It remembers the missed bounce, and it can make the micro-correction necessary to improve. Regular participation consolidates the movement patterns because the feedback is continuous. The brain is constantly updating its map of how to move.
The frequency keeps the feedback loop alive. Man, that makes total sense.
It really does.
But, before we rush out and declare that a 5-day-a-week regimented sports academy is the ultimate preschool hack, we really need to look at the boundaries of this specific study.
We do.
Because in biology, more isn't endlessly better.
Rarely is that the case. And this brings us to a vital finding in the Beijing Sport University data, which is the plateau effect.
Ah, the plateau.
Yeah, the researchers found absolutely no statistically significant additional advantage between the high-frequency group, the kids going 3 or more times a week, and the medium-high group, who are going just twice a week.
Wow. So pushing a 4-year-old to go to structured practice 3, 4, or 5 times a week didn't yield better gross motor scores than just taking them twice a week.
Not according to this data. It suggests that, at least for these specific skills in this age group, 2 times a week might be the optimal saturation point.
It provides enough frequency to keep the feedback loops fresh.
Right, allowing the nervous system to process and adapt to the physical feedback. Pushing beyond that doesn't seem to give you a measurable developmental edge. You are honestly just burning time and potentially burning out the child.
And as with all rigorous science, we have to talk about the caveats. The authors were very transparent about the study's limitations, which I always appreciate.
Transparency is a hallmark of good research. First, we have to acknowledge the small sample size.
Right. They started with 76 and ended with 63.
Due to standard attrition, kids getting sick, families moving, or simply missing too many sessions. 63 is enough to spot statistical trends, but it's not a massive population-level study.
They also pointed out that the groups were not randomly assigned.
They couldn't be, because they were based on the parents' actual scheduling realities and willingness to drive their kids to the gym.
That introduces potential selection bias, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. We have to ask, are the parents who commit the time and resources to 3 sessions a week also doing other enriching activities at home that might influence the child's development? We simply don't know.
Plus, the researchers couldn't control what the kids did during their unstructured kindergarten free play outside of the study hours.
Exactly. A kid in the low-frequency group might spend 4 hours a day climbing trees, riding bikes, and chasing dogs, which obviously impacts gross motor skills.
Another interesting note is that sex information wasn't retained in the final data set, so they couldn't control for gender differences in baseline development. Given that societal play conditioning often pushes young boys and girls toward different types of physical activities very early on, that could really skew the baseline data for locomotor versus object control skills.
It is a missing piece of the puzzle, for sure.
Yeah.
But perhaps the most significant caveat of all, and the one that really makes you think critically about the results, is the lack of a non-intervention control group.
Wait, there was no group of kids in this study who did 0 structured activities?
None. Every kid in the study was getting at least some intervention.
So what does this all mean? If there was no control group, how do we know these kids didn't just get 3 months older and naturally get better at jumping?
It's a great question.
I mean, 3 months in the life of a 4-year-old is massive in terms of biological development. If you take a kid and just let them live for 12 weeks, their muscles get stronger, their brain gets more myelinated.
What's fascinating here is that your skepticism is exactly right. Biological maturation, which, going back to Newell's model, is the individual constraint naturally evolving, definitely played a massive role in the baseline improvements seen across all the groups.
So the researchers acknowledge that.
They explicitly state this in their discussion. We cannot attribute all the growth purely to the multisport program.
It's about finding out how much of the improvement is the quote-unquote medicine of the structured gym time, and how much is just the body's natural developmental immune system doing its thing over time.
Which is exactly why future studies must include a strict non-intervention control group. Only then can we scientifically separate natural, age-related biological aging from the specific isolated benefits of the structured activity.
Okay, let's bring this all together for you, the listener. If you are navigating this landscape of preschool sports and trying to figure out the right dose for a child in your life, here are the core takeaways from the data.
Number one being regular participation, even just once a week, gets you on the board.
Right, it introduces movement experiences that help a child develop baseline skills. But if you want to see mastery of complex rhythm-based skills like skipping or continuous dribbling, twice a week appears to be the sweet spot.
That frequency builds the necessary neurological feedback loops without overwhelming the schedule.
However, going 3 or more times a week might not yield much more benefit than going twice.
The plateau is real, and it brings up a crucial final thought for you to mull over. We've established that structured play provides the specific constraints necessary to learn a targeted skill, like a one-handed dribble.
Right.
But what essential, perhaps unmeasurable developmental skills are we potentially losing when we replace unstructured, free-roaming play with highly regimented adult-directed activities too early in a child's life?
Oh man, that is the million-dollar question. If they're always in a 60-minute circuit, following instructions and walking the balance beam exactly as told, they aren't learning how to invent the game themselves.
We optimize for the dribble and the horizontal jump. But what might we be sacrificing in terms of creativity, risk assessment, or social negotiation on the playground?
A perfect thought to leave on. If you want to dive deeper into the specific TGM-D3 metrics and see the exact breakdown of how these kids improved in each individual skill, we highly encourage you to read the full article for yourself.
It is incredibly accessible and completely changes how you look at a preschool gym class.
And if you enjoyed this custom-tailored analysis, please follow the channel and turn on notifications. We will keep bringing you scientifically grounded, deep dives into fascinating research, helping you cut through the noise.
Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.
Because as we learned today, finding the right dose isn't just about reading a label. Sometimes it's about knowing when to apply the formula and when to just